Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show. It's been quite a week, hasn't it? President Trump announced on Friday morning that he had the coronavirus, and then he announced that he was going to Walter Reed Hospital because of an excess of caution, which worried many people. And then he has checked himself out today as of 6:30 Eastern time, I believe. I'm looking at the front page of the Drudge Report here, and it is just panic central. President heading home, mysteries around health, family divided over behavior. Pence, Harris tied in poll, debate in days, plexiglass barrier. White House Press Secretary McEnany infected. Resident staffers who caught it told to keep quiet. Trump to be discharged tells Americans, don't be afraid of COVID. I feel better than I did 20 years ago. President didn't disclose his positive test. Don't tell anyone. Lied to Hannity. History of falsehoods come back to haunt. Secret Service agent. He's not even pretending to care now. Reckless. So what is the latest here? This is from the Daily Mail. We're not out of the woods, but he is back. Trump's doctor says he is well enough to return to COVID-infested White House tonight, despite being on a cocktail of experimental drugs, and grins as he refuses to answer key questions. President Trump will leave hospital at 6:30 p.m. on Monday night, despite his doctors saying he's not out of the woods. This is what he had to say on Twitter today. I will be leaving the great Walter Reed Medical Center today at 6:30 p.m. Feeling really good. Don't be afraid of COVID. Don't let it dominate your life. We have developed under the Trump administration some really great drugs and knowledge. I feel better than I did 20 years ago. So when it was announced that Trump had COVID, there was a celebration in the media, particularly amongst the celebrities. Who were tripping over each other, boasting of how much they were looking forward to him dying in agony. And now that it appears that he is not going to die, and these same people seem to take this as a personal affront, which is just too funny. Old man gets sick, doesn't die, millions weep. Dr. Sean Conley said we're in a bit of uncharted territory with a patient who received the therapies he has so early in the course. If we can get to the weekend and Monday with him feeling the way he is, we can all take a sigh of relief. The doctor said Trump will receive his fourth remdesivir dose on Monday night before he leaves the hospital, and his fifth on Tuesday. The president's kidney and liver function are both good. They said his temperature on Monday was 98.1 Fahrenheit. The doctors defended their treatment of him and of the decision to discharge him, saying he has some of the best care in the world at the White House. Every day a patient stays in the hospital unnecessarily is a risk to themselves. There's nothing being done here that can't be done safely at home. That's why we all remain cautiously optimistic and on guard. We all remain cautiously optimistic and on guard because we're in a bit of uncharted territory when it comes to a patient that received the therapies he has so early in the course. Yes, Dr. Coney cited patient confidentiality laws during the press conference when asked about Trump's lungs. He, however, said that his liver and kidney function were good and that Trump did not put any pressure on doctors to release him, despite earlier reports that he was done with staying in the hospital and was demanding to be discharged on Sunday. The president has been a phenomenal patient during his stay here. He's been working hand in glove. Today, it got the point. He's holding court, going over the specifics, the testing, what the future is. We've been back and forth and what's safe and reasonable. So the Mail has a sidebar here. Trump's inner circle who have tested positive for COVID. And you know what's happening here is that I was talking last week about the dreaded super spreaders. And oh no, Trump is a super spreader. So let's see who has COVID in the White House. Ronna McDaniel, chair of the Republican National Convention. Hope Hicks, counselor to the president. Trump himself, his wife Melania. Father John Jenkins, 66, the president of the University of Notre Dame, who attended the announcement of Amy Coney Barrett as Trump's Supreme Court nomination without a mask on Saturday, September the 25th. He is not thought to have severe symptoms. Mike Lee, 49, Republican Utah Senator. Bill Stepien, 42, Trump's campaign manager. Michael Shear, 52, New York Times White House correspondent, and 2 other named journalists. Tom Tillis, 60, Republican North Carolina Senator. Chris Christie, 58, former New Jersey governor. Nicholas Luna, 29, chief of Oval Office operations and body man. Ron Johnson, 65, Republican Wisconsin senator. Kelly Conway, 53, former White House counselor to the president, and I'll have more to say about her later. And apparently there are others. Yeah. So it's been brought home to me this year. There's so many of these people who are constantly yelling about science don't seem to understand how viruses work. Again, viruses do not have agency. They are not sentient. They are not vicious. But let's all pretend that that isn't the case. Jim Kunstler writes this morning, hallelujahs echoed across the blue media late last week when the news broke that Donald Trump tested positive for coronavirus. For 4 years, the president had foiled every ambuscade set along his path by a morally inflamed predatory resistance, and each time he beeped his way around the trap. But now, with little help from a pitiless universe, they had him. A gazillion tiny viral assassins were stealing through his bloodstream like so many microscopic jihadis, primping him for an agonizing death. His alveoli withering, red corpuscles robbed of their vital O2, pink foam issuing from his nostrils, toes and fingers turning blue-green, and most deliciously at all, he'd remain conscious of his imminent defeat of the life which he never deserved in the first place, draining by degrees from his wicked, orange, bloated, supine carcass. Except, wait a minute, what the hell? How could it be? Late Sunday, he somehow arose from his bed of death, ordered pizza with meat for 1,000 imps and demons camped outside Walter Reed Hospital, and walked under his own power into a limousine to take a ride around the block and wave at his unholy minions. The cheek of this man. CNN had a whack attack. Brian Stelter was beside himself, hinting that sinister forces had punked the network and all the other righteous resistance cadres, and that Trump could be endangering every federal employee down to the enlisted man posted overseas by venturing from his sick room. The New York Times went farther afield, of course, declaring that the murky and shifting narrative of his illness was rewritten again with grim new details. Nicely put by an outfit that has come to specialize in shifting narratives. And indeed, the new resistance narrative demands to know just exactly when did the president start to feel ill. Did he perhaps on purpose haul his ailing, hulking, scheming golem ass into the Cleveland debate venue with the hope of infecting his rival, delicate old white Joe Biden? Did he recklessly put at risk the White House staff, dignitaries, and luminaries coming and going, their family members, associates, underlings, servants, children? Did he threaten the global order, world peace, the fate of humanity? So now a keening wail of lamentation rings out across the land at Trump's possible dastardly recovery. How dare he? To paraphrase St. Greta Thunberg, 209,000 other Americans died, and not him. What vile and unholy devices got him out of a sure death sentence? No doubt Democratic Party astrologue gazers and consulting augurers will be searching for clues among the orbiting planets and the spilled organs of sacrificed chickens in the days to come. Perhaps Representative Adam Schiff can snare a few of the president's attending physicians into his House Intel Committee and rev up another impeachment for going against doctors' orders. Wouldn't it be a delectable counter to the looming confirmation process for Ruth Bader Ginsburg replacement next door in the Senate this month? Over his dead body, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is hinting a tantalizing prospect with COVID-19 on the loose. It was Chuck who memorably told Rachel Maddow of MSNBC in 2017 that the deep state has 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. By my count, they're well over their allotted 6 by now. Not only did they all fail, but the seditionists behind them are liable to wind up behind bars before this is all over, perhaps even a few of Senator Schumer's colleagues. Anyway, Majority Leader McConnell isn't buying Schumer's sob story. The Senate floor schedule will not interrupt the thoroughfare and historically supported confirmation process, McConnell said on Saturday. The hearings are pegged to begin on October the 12th. Prediction, they will run 3 days tops and the nominee will sail through. No doubt Senator Schumer and company will be combing the legislative rules thickets with their lawfare bush beaters in search of some recondite magic bylaw that might prevent the deal from going down. Or else Chuck will threaten to shoot a puppy on the floor of the Senate if the Amy Coney Barrett hearing proceeds. The news has it this morning that the president might check out of Walter Reed later today. The event is loaded to the brim with portentous metaphor, mainly that Trump has overcome yet another adversity, specifically one that the resistance has been using to scare the public into compliance with economy-wrecking rules. As the president re-enters something like normal life in the days ahead, perhaps the rest of America will rethink the abnormalities of 2020. Perhaps they will notice the Democratic Party's investment in the COVID-19 lockdown narrative and what it has done to their livelihoods, their families, and their futures. Maybe watching Trump get through this, they will see a way out of the woods. So Saturday Night Live began its, upteenth season a couple of days ago. And they had a lot of fun with Donald Trump's illness. My heart goes out to COVID. Chris Rock mocks sick Donald Trump in SLN opening monologue. Poking fun at the show's coronavirus precautions, Rock said, "I haven't had so much stuff up my nose since I shared a dressing room with Chris Farley." Oh, a Chris Farley dead joke. Always a popular. So Chris Rock apparently has been doing a lot of thinking, serious thinking about the political process in the United States. He quipped, "Joe Biden should be the last president ever, and we need a whole new system." I mean, what job do you have for 4 years no matter what? Just show me one job. Like if you hired a cook and he was making people vomit every day, do you sit there and go, well, he's got a 4-year deal. We just got to vomit for 4 more years. He joked that being the president of the US has more relaxed qualifications than a game show does. I mean, to be the president of the United States, all you have to be is 35 and born in the United States, Rock said. Very funny stuff, just knee-slapping stuff. There should be some rules to being the president. You realize there's more rules to a game show than running for president? Like Donald Trump left a game show to run for president because it was easier, he joked. You can't just throw your son on Jeopardy or your son-in-law. Steve Harvey can't put his family on Family Feud. And then he did some criticizing of the Democrats. Do the Democrats even want to win? They keep putting up 75-year-old people to run against Trump, which I guess is a shot at Hillary Clinton. He ended his monologue urging viewers to vote in the election just 1 month away. Hey, we've got to make this serious. We've got to get out there. We've got to vote. It's implicit in all these get out the vote appeals that these people who weren't voting are, of course, they're going to vote for the Democratic candidate. And I don't really know why they would come to that conclusion. William Briggs writes, after I wrote this, I went over to Drudge, which I rarely do these days, and he's on full-blown hysteria about Trump's illness. Hilarious. So Trump has caught the corona doom, and many cannot contain their glee. It's not just our nation's most celebrated wishing our president unwell, it's also various political figures. Eleanor Penny, who worked at George Soros's Open Democracy outlet, said, "I don't hope Trump dies from COVID. I hope he dies from anything. I'm really not fussy." There isn't space to quote from all the people on the left who act as if the culture war we are in is in fact a war, except to say that these folks should not act surprised if someday the favors are returned. Some commentary on Trump's condition is more refined, but speculative. There's nothing wrong with this. Speculation is all we have. It's all the president's doctors have as well. Doctors' treatments for most diseases are in many cases nothing more than hopeful but authoritative guesses. The only sin against guessing is getting the uncertainty wrong. The New York Times, for instance, speculates that Trump's persistent refusal to wear a mask may also change the course of his illness. If he became infected while his face was uncovered, He may have been exposed to a greater concentration of virus, which also raises the risk for severe disease, according to experts who have not examined him, but were able to speak generally about patients like him. We, too, have not examined Trump, but since the Times has set the standard of allowing uninformed commentary on the course of the president's illness, we'll do the same. Starting with this opinion on masks from Dr. Fauci himself, quote, "In the United States, people should not be walking around with masks. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is," unquote. Well, masks have become our new national religion, an obvious outward display of faith. How dare Fauci speak against them? Anyway, Trump is 74. The CDC says that 1.2% people in his age bracket, 65 to 74, have died this year from causes other than COVID-19. It also says 0.13% of these people, 10 times fewer, have died at least with, and not necessarily of, the coronavirus. As long as we're speculating, we might as well do so about Joe Biden, who is 77. In his age bracket, 75 to 84 years old, 2.9% of Americans this age have died so far this year of causes other than COVID-19, and at least 0.32% have died at least with the coronavirus. In both age brackets, then, Americans have about 10 times greater risk of dying from something other than COVID-19. But those in the older bucket are dying at rates about twice those in the younger bucket from any cause, which means what we knew it always meant: older people die more often than younger. The difference here is that the president has tested positive for the coronavirus and has been said to be experiencing mild symptoms. The president's weight is likely a strike against him. Based on an item from the Drudge tabloid, the Times speculated the president may also have other unreported comorbidities. We are thus free to speculate that his health before the infection is as reported, which is fine. Having comorbidities is never good. Of those who died with the corona doom, about 4 times as many had other illnesses, 22% versus 6% with no comorbidities, according to the CDC. But these aren't the right numbers to use to judge the president's prognosis. What we want to know is the infection fatality rate for people like him. Nobody really knows this number yet, since all the data is not in. Some estimate it is as high as 4.2% for the president's sex and age bracket, meaning a 95.8% recovery. Some estimate women do about twice as well as men. Thus, according to gender theory, if Trump changed his Mr. to Mrs., she'd have a better chance for survival. I dare you to find a professor who will openly and on the record disagree with this. A better guess is to use reports from Trump's actual doctors. Chief of Staff Mark Meadows at Walter Reed said the president is doing very well. He said he was cautiously optimistic and that his symptoms were already resolving and improving. Or we could take a look at the man himself, who looks like he's doing okay. Trump is going to disappoint a lot of people if he lives, which the vast majority of people infected with this virus do. You can read all about that in The Price of Panic: How the Tyranny of Experts Turned a Pandemic into a Catastrophe. So, are jokes banned yet? We get the impression that we're very close to banning jokes because there's always people who are going to be offended by them. According to the Daily Mail, Chris Pratt is in serious trouble now. The actor promoting his new Pixar movie Onward wrote a lengthy caption on Instagram talking about the importance of voting and encouraging fans to vote for his movie for this year's People's Choice Awards. Given the timing, with less than a month until the presidential election, Pratt was accused of being insensitive and tone deaf. Ooh, that phrase, tone deaf, very problematic, as his message sounded political at first before he went on to call the awards show nomination the most consequential vote in the history of mankind. With all this going on in the world, it is more important than ever that you vote, he wrote. Just ask any celebrity. They will tell you every day, several times a day, to vote. But me, I will tell you exactly who to vote for. The heroes before us did not spill their blood only to have their sacrifices wasted by your apathy. The upcoming 2020 People's Choice Awards is the most consequential vote in the history of mankind, a million infinity. Vote for Onward for Family Movie of the Year, or else you will die. No hyperbole. Check the link in my bio. Let your voice be heard. So you see, Chris Pratt he's making fun of the narcissism and pretentiousness of his own class. But how can anyone make jokes when people are dying? Of course, people are always dying. And we continue to make jokes, at least I guess we can for the time being. It's said that Shakespeare wrote that an ungrateful child is sharper than a serpent's tooth. And this brings us to Claudia Conway, who is, I just really, I feel very sorry for her parents, because with this woman, she's 15 years old, that she's just counting down the ways until she gets her own OnlyFans account. Kellyanne Conway's daughter, Claudia, said in a TikTok video on Sunday that she has tested positive for COVID-19 just 2 days after revealing her mother also has the virus. Claudia, 15, captioned the video, "Hey guys, currently dying of COVID." The teen first revealed that her mother tested positive for COVID-19 in a TikTok video, and Conway later took to Twitter to confirm. Update, "My mom has COVID," Claudia revealed on Friday. In another TikTok video, Claudia claimed that her mother was coughing all over the house. Yeah, that sounds like a fun place with their very own junior Stasi member. It comes days after Conway attended a White House event that is now linked to at least 7 other COVID-19 cases, including President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump. Conway tweeted Friday that she has a light cough and is feeling fine. "I've begun a quarantine process in consultation with physicians," she added. "As always, my heart is with everyone affected by this global pandemic." Claudia began to speculate that the former White House advisor, her mother, may have been infected in a string of videos posted to TikTok on Friday evening. "My mom coughing all around the house after Trump tested positive for COVID. That's weird. That's suspicious. When my lungs hurt and it's hard for me to breathe," she wrote on the next, revealing that she was also experiencing coronavirus symptoms. She later posted a singing video before returning to Trump and his positive coronavirus test. "I don't wish ill on anyone, but the irony," she said. "I hope the Lysol cures him." Claudia added as she played a line from Tuesday's debate in which Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden tells Trump, "You're the worst president America has ever had." Did Trump start a war and lose a war with some country? That might get him considered the worst president. But he hasn't started any wars, which makes a lot of people angry. It's funny how, people who consider themselves liberals, people consider themselves to be very good people, seemingly desperate to kill foreigners for whatever reason. I'm looking at a picture of Jake Tapper here, and I just can't help laughing. Without providing any evidence whatsoever, this is from Steve Watson at Summit News. CNN, which should henceforth be called the Conspiracy News Network, declared Sunday that President Trump's doctors are purposely misleading the public and hiding things. The comments were made by CNN's chief medical correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, after host Jake Tapper declared that White House physician Dr. Sean Conley, before this episode, had an impeccable reputation. He was asked why he didn't give all the information yesterday, and he said he was trying to, I'm quoting, "trying to reflect the upbeat attitude of the team and not give any information that would steer the course of his illness. Is that what a physician is supposed to do?" Tapper asked. "Well, one of the things that a physician is not supposed to do is to pronounce a diagnosis on someone that they have not examined." This came up in a presidential election in 1964, where, what was his name? Publisher Ralph Ginsburg had a magazine in which he invited all these psychiatrists to pronounce on the mental health of Barry Goldwater, where they concluded that Barry Goldwater was nuts. And the American Psychiatric Association was forced to issue a release saying, no, psychiatrists do not pronounce on the mental health of people that they have not examined. Gupta said, you've got to be honest. You've got to be transparent. All these details matter. I mean, he is out and coming out to brief the public about the president. That's the briefing that's happening. If you're going to do that, then you have to be absolutely honest. Oh, Tapper chimed in proclaiming, I am the son of a doctor and a nurse, and I understand the inclination in the public to believe doctors. We want to believe doctors. We also have to note there is a long and ugly history in this country of presidents not being honest about their health, with the American people and doctors being used as part of that cover-up. Tapper continued, providing zero evidence that anyone is covering up anything about Trump's health. 100 years ago, it was Woodrow Wilson, FDR, John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, and on and on and on. It's the reason why I interviewed Joe Biden, made him give a pledge. Would he always be upfront about all aspects of his health in real time? We're not getting that from Donald Trump and his team right now. We are not getting all the facts. Why? Tapper asked Gupta. Paul Joseph Watson tweeted, the same people who lectured us for the past 6 months about taking COVID seriously and not engaging in conspiracy theories are now, after Trump caught it, not taking COVID seriously and engaging in conspiracy theories. It's okay when we do it. And Jake Tapper said on CNN, sick and in isolation, Mr. President, you have become a symbol of your own failures, failures of recklessness, ignorance, arrogance, the same failures you have been inflicting on the rest of us. Get well and get it together. What a silly, silly man. Let's have a look at the chat here. Let's see, Trump spreading COVID like those tear gas machines from Soweto. De Barreas predicts that Joe will fake a positive to match Trump. I don't really think that Biden comes out of this looking good, because he's clearly absolutely terrified of catching COVID-19, and he clearly believes that if he does, he will die. And I think he communicates this weakness to the American people, whereas Trump is conveying the opposite. He's conveying strength. Chris Rock, was he funny at one time? I thought so. But it seems what happened with Chris Rock is that he felt that he had a great many white fans, and his white fans were particularly fond of the things, the unflattering things that Chris Rock said about some black people. And this angered Chris Rock, and he hasn't been funny for some time. Justin Proto says voting is only to trick the plebes, that they have a say in what goes on. Does anyone think that without voting, there'd be as many leftist zealots as there are? Justin Proto said, in that respect, I think African Americans have the most sophisticated understanding of voting democracy, even though the majority couldn't articulate the relationship. There seems to be some person who hates Donald Trump in the chat named Lola J. A lot of emojis. There. Yo Mama says the real catastrophe is Dune and getting delayed until next October. I was reading about Avatar 3, that James Cameron, there was a joke on CDAN that the filming of Avatar 3 has taken so long that Cameron managed to get his mistress pregnant, and she's actually given birth. What else do we have here? Yes, there's an insult about Sanjay Gupta, which made me laugh, but I'm not going to repeat it. British American says, it just keeps blowing up in the Dems' faces, doesn't it? They're delighted that Trump gets COVID, then he beats it and accomplishes two things, a bump in his approval, a demo of Paper Tiger COVID. Donald Robertson says, national security says, don't panic the public. Well, I would have thought so. But no, apparently this is one of the ways in which Donald Trump has failed the American people, because he has not encouraged them to run around screaming like their hair is on fire. Let's see. Trump tweeted about an hour ago, you see it in enthusiasm for the president outside Walter Reed Hospital. You see it in registrations from Florida to Pennsylvania and West Virginia, where Republicans are outstripping Democrats by 2-1. If the president bounces back onto the campaign trail, he will be an invincible hero who not only survived every dirty trick the Democrats threw at him, but the Chinese virus as well. He will show America we no longer have to be afraid, and that is from a writer at the New York Post. So, what else do we got here? Oh, yes, vaccine. The vaccine is coming, or the vaccines are coming, ready or not. And we already know that a rather high percentage of Americans and Britons, for that matter, have made it clear that they do not intend to take the virus. They do not intend to take the vaccine. But are we going to have a choice in this matter is the question. Perhaps it will be made mandatory. Again, from Summit News, this is pretty funny. Trump's in hospital with COVID, yet he still managed one more public appearance than Biden on Sunday. Trump surprised reporters gathered outside the Walter Reed Medical Facility by going out for a short drive to wave and give thanks. This constituted one more public appearance than his rival Joe Biden made Sunday. The president also thanked doctors and nurses, noting that I learned a lot about COVID. I learned it by really going to school. This is the real school. This isn't the let's read the books school. And I get it, and I understand it. It's a very interesting thing. Comfortably Smug tweeted, wait, there was a Biden lid today? Did Trump just do more events than Biden while in the hospital with COVID? There were hundreds of supporters outside Walter Reed, and Trump bought them pizzas. Every couple of hours, he'd buy a few hundred pizzas, and this seemed to please his supporters. Trump's appearance infuriated leftists, many of whom had spent the past 24 hours celebrating and sharing their desire to see Trump die from the virus. Statement from the president of the White House Correspondents Association, Zeke J. Miller. It is outrageous for the president to have left the hospital, even briefly, amid a health crisis without a protective pool present to ensure that the American people know where the president is and how he is doing. Now more than ever, the American public deserves an independent coverage of the president so they can be reliably informed about his health. Michael Cohen, who is surely the most hated man in America, in one word, described the media stunt just pulled by Donald Trump in leaving Walter Reed Hospital, knowing he is sick and infected with COVID-19. Let me start with schmuck. An attending physician at Walter Reed. The presidential SUV is not only bulletproof, but hermetically sealed against chemical attack. The risk of COVID-19 transmission inside is as high as it gets outside of medical procedures. The irresponsibility is astounding. My thoughts are with the Secret Service forced to play. Molly Hemingway quoted Drew Holden. If you thought the blue check commentary class was mad about Trump before, just wait until how they'll be now that he didn't die like they had hoped for. Molly Hemingway says they are so angry. It is truly out of control. I thought I had a story here about virus. Let's see. Yes, again. Yeah, here it is. Medical Journal calls for mandatory COVID vaccine. And again, this is from Steve Watson. A paper published in the New England Journal of Medicine has called for mandating a coronavirus vaccine and outlined strategies for how Americans could be forced to take it. The paper warns that an immediate mandate for the vaccine would spark too much resistance and backlash. So the writers suggest that at first it should be voluntary. However, it suggests that if not enough people are willing to get the vaccine within the first few weeks of its availability, it should be transformed into an obligation, with penalties put into place for refusal. The paper outlines 6 trigger criteria that need to be met before the vaccine is made mandatory, and that it should be rolled out to the specific demographics of the population first. Only recommended groups should be considered for a vaccination mandate initially, according to the paper, which cites high-risk groups as the first set of people. The elderly health professionals working in high-risk situations are working with high-risk patients, persons with certain underlying medical conditions, as well as those in high-density settings, such as prisons and dormitories, should be mandated to get the jab, the paper says. It also suggests that active duty military service members should be among the first that are forced into the vaccination. The paper proclaims that noncompliance should incur a penalty and notes that it should be a relatively substantial one. It suggests that employment suspension or stay-at-home orders should be issued, but that fines should be discouraged because they can be legally challenged and may stoke distrust without improving uptake. The paper also suggests the government health authorities should avoid making public their close relationship with vaccine manufacturers to quell public mistrust. Just coincidentally, the authors of the paper reside at Yale and Stanford, institutions that have received substantial funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for vaccine development. The prospect of denying freedom of movement to those who refuse to vaccinate has been floated recently in the UK, where government health officials have also suggested the jab should be made mandatory. In the US, calls have been made to make any vaccination mandatory, with the likes of the New York Times expressing concern that half of Americans would refuse to take it. In Canada, a poll recently revealed that 60% think that when a vaccine for coronavirus becomes available, it should be made mandatory. In addition, Canada's current chief public health officer appeared in a recently resurfaced 2010 documentary in which she advocated using mandatory tracking bracelets for people who refuse to take a vaccine after a virus outbreak. So a New York Times reporter called Peter S. Goodman was in London recently, and he did not like what he found. Keep calm and carry on may not work in a time of pandemic. 80 years after Londoners rallied in the face of the deadly German Blitz, many are flouting the rules aimed at preventing the spread of the novel coronavirus. You see what he's done there? He's equating a virus with German bombs exploding in your city. Such a vicious, vicious virus. During a recent visit to a private London hospital, I was horrified to encounter a delivery man wheeling in a load of supplies without wearing a face mask. An orderly in blue scrubs stood inside the elevator 3 feet from me with his mask draped around his chin. The scene of the hospital may present an especially shocking example of the casual way in which many people in London continue to confront a pandemic that has killed more than 50,000 Britons, but is hardly unusual. Coronavirus cases are again increasing rapidly. Let shoppers routinely wander the aisles of the supermarket in our North London neighborhood, Hampstead, without wearing masks. Cafes and pubs are full of people hoisting drinks in proximity. When I asked the proprietor of our local indoor fruit and vegetable market why, despite regulations mandating masks, he was allowing unlimited numbers of people to enter his narrow premises absent protection, he gruffly waved me away. "We're not the police," he said. Every morning, I take my children to school on the public bus where the 14-passenger limit is routinely breached, along with face mask rules. We angle for a spot near an open window. At our international school, the children must wear masks, but as I walk home through the leafy streets, I see children and parents chatting jovially without masks as they await the opening of their school gates. They look like people lining up to board the Titanic. Beyond the obvious ways that this cavalier behavior is disconcerting, it has enhanced a widely shared sense that Britain, famously rule-abiding, is now operating without adult supervision. Public confidence has plummeted, with more than half of respondents in a recent survey declaring the government has botched its handling of the pandemic, up from 39% in May. That may have something to do with Prime Minister Boris Johnson changing his mind seemingly on a weekly basis. The modern Britain that we learn about in history lessons supposedly displayed its truest character during World War II, when Winston Churchill exhorted the nation to persevere in the face of the Blitz, the relentless German bombing campaign. People pulled together and endured in a collective effort whose inconveniences and indignities were borne as the cost of defeating the enemy. The government issued 35 million gas masks to civilians who carried them to work and church and kept them at their bedsides, writes Eric Larson in his History of the Blitz, the Splendid and the Vile. Strict blackout rules so darkened the streets of the city that it became nearly impossible to recognize a visitor at a train station after dark. Yes, and old people were arrested because they had neglected to turn off the last light. How did that society turn into this one? This fellow was actually hoping that the terror, the panic of London in World War II is replicated, because the virus is COVID-19. Is it a Nazi virus? I suspect we're told that it is. It hits minorities especially hard, but I don't believe it's been called a Nazi virus yet. That may be coming. It may be coming. Okay. Oh, what's Governor Death up to? Let's have a look at that. And by Governor Death, I refer to the Love Gov, Andrew Cuomo of New York State, dishing it 24/7, as his brother Chris Cuomo famously said. Cuomo orders hundreds of schools in 9 New York City neighborhoods to close from tomorrow, and also threatens to shut down religious institutions if they fail to social distance. The schools, both public and private, will be required to close from Tuesday onwards in the Brooklyn and Queens neighborhoods where COVID-19 positivity rates have been surging. Cuomo could not immediately confirm how many schools will have to close and for how long. It is believed about 100 public schools and 200 private schools are located within these zip codes. The number of new COVID-19 cases has been rising in pockets of the city, predominantly in neighborhoods in Brooklyn and Queens that are home to the city's large Orthodox Jewish population. Those areas represent 7% of the city's population, but have been responsible for more than 20% of all new infections over the past 4 weeks. Many religious schools in these neighborhoods resumed in-person classes in early September. Cuomo also threatened to shut down temples and churches in those neighborhoods following, wait for it, super spreader mass gatherings that he said have been going on for weeks. Why is it that New York State has done so much worse than, say, Florida, which had New York State had a very, very strict lockdown, and apparently they're going back to it, but Florida did not, and it relaxed some time ago, but the death numbers are much, much higher in New York State than they are in Florida. Let's see, New York faced one of the nation's earliest and most devastating outbreaks of the coronavirus in the spring, but has since managed to largely curtail its spread. Yes, this story mentioned that the Love Gov condemned thousands of old people to die by forcing infected people into nursing homes. Also, there's all this talk about cases, and there's a graph here with cases. But are people dying as they were in the spring, in the numbers that they were? They're not, actually. And the Mail does not report this because to do so would lessen panic. A new technology being used in shops in Thailand and other countries to enforce coronavirus restrictions conducts a face scan to check if the customer is wearing a mask and refuses entry if they don't have one. My local shops in Thailand in 2 seconds scans my temperature and to see if wearing mask. Doors don't open. If not, 3 cases in 100 plus days here. Removes awkward mask arguments for staff as well, retweeted Neil Harbison. The system resembles something you'd see as part of airport security. The customer walks up to a screen which displays the words face detector. The system then scans to check if the customer is wearing a mask before allowing them to pass through a barrier. Many of the respondents in the Twitter thread supported the idea, but others warned that this was another example of how people are being forced to accept the new normal. I wish people would stop championing and normalizing this nonsense, comment one user. We will never get back to 2019 normal if we continue down this road. A global overreaction of epic proportions. We've been utterly played by the Chinese over this one. I bet they can't believe it themselves. Another respondent pointed out that a similar system was also being used in Scotland. With the world increasingly heading towards a Chinese-style social credit score system, it's possible that in the longer term, the technology will be used beyond masks to refuse entry to people whose faces have been entered into a database. It could also be used to enforce a myriad of other restrictions, such as forcing people to face scan before they use the internet, already being introduced in China, and refusing access if their social credit score has dropped. China has already combined its COVID-19 track and trace system with the communist country's social credit score program. In August 2019, the communist state bragged about how it had prevented 2.5 million discredited entities from purchasing plane tickets and 90,000 people from buying high-speed train tickets in the month of July alone. So let's take a look at lockdown skeptics. Toby Young. Even hardcore skeptics might have experienced a tremor of doubt yesterday on seeing the daily total of new COVID cases in England. Is witless and unbalanced graph of doom going to turn out to be accurate? No. The reason Sunday's figure was so high is because 15,841 additional cases were added to the daily total, which without them would have been 7,120, which is almost exactly what they were 7 days ago on September 29th. So where did these extra 15,841 cases come from? Apparently, they are positives spread out over a 7-day period between September 25th and October 2nd, but which were omitted from the daily totals due to a technical glitch. Boris Johnson said earlier on Sunday that there was a failure in the counting system, which has now been rectified. He told BBC One's Andrew Marshall it was a computing issue, and all those who had a positive test had been notified. Well, PHE said the technical issue did not affect people getting their test results. Test and Trace and PHE Joint Medical Advisor Susan Hopkins has said it resulted in a delay in cases being passed into the contact tracing system. Just when you think that this government's handling of the crisis could not get any worse, Matt Hancock says, hold my beer. Robert Peston, writing in The Spectator, says the reason for the confidence-destroying lag was a glitch in two of Public Health England's legacy computer systems, which meant that data was not being transmitted properly, or at least that is what a senior official tells me. The glitch has apparently now been fixed, but confusion has been sown and damage done. Lord Bethell, a health minister, has told the Conservative Party conference that Britain will look back on the government's handling of the coronavirus with pride and compared it to the 2012 London Olympics. The Mail on Sunday ran a story about the Amnesty International report on the disastrous impact of the UK government's mismanagement of the coronavirus crisis on care homes. It could not be more damning. It is an excoriating verdict that will undoubtedly give voice to the rage and anguish of thousands of families. The government's pandemic policies violated the fundamental human rights of vulnerable older people in care, a major report has concluded. Inexplicable decisions were made that were heedless at best. The measures exposed elderly residents to the virus and then crucially blocked them from receiving life-saving medical care. And ultimately, this led to tens of thousands of deaths, according to the Amnesty International analysis shared exclusively with the Mail of Sunday ahead of publication. The report will show starkly that ministers knew from the outset that COVID-19 posed an exceptional danger to the 400,000 residents of UK care homes, many of whom are frail and live with multiple health conditions. But while claiming time and again that the need to protect them was at the very heart of policy, what actually happened was quite the opposite. Homes were overwhelmed by infections and older people were subject to inhuman and degrading treatment. The review paints the government as directly responsible and lays bare a litany of failures and sinister edicts that resulted in tragedy. And we hear more about the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, who is, I suppose, being touted as the anti-Boris candidate. But as I explained earlier, given how difficult it was for the Tories to get rid of Theresa May, I think, Theresa May once looks like an accident. Boris Johnson screwing up royally, it begins to look just like carelessness, that they can't pick a proper leader. Toby Young writes, a reader has written to clarify some things about Professor Neil Ferguson's previous barmy predictions. It seems I understated his alarmism. You wrote, worth reminding people again that Professor Ferguson's estimates of the impact of previous viral outbreaks have been almost comically inaccurate. In 2001, Ferguson was involved in modeling for foot and mouth disease. Because of that, some extra 7 million sheep and cattle were slaughtered that needn't have been. In 2002, Ferguson predicted that up to 50,000 people would die from variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, better known as the mad cow disease, increasing to 150,000 if the epidemic expanded to include sheep. The reality is, since 1990, 178 people in the United Kingdom have died from Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. In 2005, Ferguson claimed that up to 200 million people would be killed by bird flu, or H5N1. By early 2006, the World Health Organization had only linked 78 deaths to the virus out of 147 reported cases. In 2009, Ferguson and his team at Imperial College advised the government that swine flu, or H1N1, would probably kill 65,000 people in the UK. In the end, swine flu claimed the lives of 457 people in the UK. In 2020, well, the rest is hysteria. Toby Young asks, if lockdowns, masks, and social distancing work, why haven't deaths from flu and pneumonia declined? A reader took a screen grab of the above ONS chart in the most recent episode of Andrew Neil's show on Spectator TV, comparing deaths from flu and pneumonia in 2020 with the 5-year average. They were fractionally below at the beginning of the year, and they're fractionally below now, but have tracked the 5-year average pretty consistently since January 1st. This begs the question, if the government's non-pharmaceutical interventions did little to stop the transmission of flu and pneumonia, why should we think that they've done anything to prevent the transmission of SARS-CoV-2? And finally, lockdowns had little effect on COVID-19 spread in the United States. As I pointed out a few minutes ago, if lockdowns were effective, then one would have expected New York to have a low death count, but New York has a very high death count compared to, say, Florida. Okay. Oh, yes. Yeah, I'll just mention this here. This is shocking stuff, really. Cycling team Trek Segafredo has suspended the 2019 Junior Road Race World Champion Quinn Simmons after he made comments in support of President Trump on Twitter. Simmons, a 19-year-old American, was replying to Dutch cycling journalist Jose Bean. Bean initially tweeted statements that were critical of Trump. Quote, "My dear American friends, I hope this horrible presidency ends for you and for us as former allies too." Bean wrote, "If you follow me and support Trump, you can go. There is zero excuse to follow or vote for the vile, horrible man." Simmons replied to Bean with bye, B-Y-E, and a black skin waving hand emoji. Another Twitter user replied to Bean with apparently a Trumper. Simmons replied again with "that's right" and an American flag emoji. The racing team released a statement late Wednesday night about Simmons' tweets and his use of the black hand emoji. "While we support the right to free speech, we will hold people accountable for their words and actions. Regrettably, Simmons made statements online that we feel are divisive, incendiary, and detrimental to the team, professional cycling, its fans, and the positive future we hope to help create for the sport. In response, he will not be racing for Trek Segafredo until further notice." There's been some backlash and talk of boycotting Trek cycling products after Simmons' suspension, since he appears to be guilty of nothing more than stating his support for the current U.S. president, and none of his comments were derogatory or inappropriate. However, the issue could be his use of a black skin hand emoji. Since Simmons is white, using an emoji with a dark skin tone could be considered to be a form of blackface. Trek Segafredo has not explained what specifically got Simmons suspended. Bean, the cycling journalist who started the exchange, deleted her original tweet about Trump. On Thursday, she tweeted that she feels horrible at the situation and terrible for Quinn Simmons to miss his beloved classics. To suspend him would never be my choice. It appears that Bean then deleted her entire Twitter account. Let's have a look at the chat. What is going on there? A lot of emojis. A lot of emojis in the chat. Donald Robertson says, if need be, Pence can announce that Trump is incapacitated at the same time he would announce his provisional presidency. Okay. Trump being seen in car played as bug spreading by United Media. And talk about the Kinks hit from 1970, Lola. Yes, there's a line about Coca-Cola, which the BBC would not play the song unless the reference to Coke was removed. Similarly, the Mott the Hoople song, All the Young Dudes, written by David Bowie, had a line about Marks and Sparks, which is Marks and Spencer, and they made them change that to, what was it, Parked Cars, so that it could be played on the BBC. You know, Alan Partridge had great fun with this when, on many shows, he is deliberately, outrageously shilled for the car manufacturer Rover, and pretended that, oh, no, this is complete, this, you know, I'm not getting anything out of this. I just love Rover cars so very much. In fact, in one of his shows, he said, you know, he wasn't showing favorites, and he talked about when he was a child, his parents had a Vauxhall Labrador, and someone said, there's no such car. Yes, there was. We had a Vauxhall Labrador. Had many great times in that car. Okay. Let's see. Higher levels of vitamin D in Florida than New York. Well, yeah, that would be, that could be one reason. But of course, you get vitamin C, you get vitamin D naturally from the sun. And of course, if you're banned from going outdoors, then you're going to have to get vitamin D in pill form. Okay. Let's see. Donald D.B. Cooper says, it's amazing that between Ferguson and Fauci, they seem to be responsible for every panic I remember from my youth. Mad cow disease, AIDS, SARS. Now this. Digital blackface. Yeah, says D.B. Cooper. It's what a world. What a world we live in. The bunch of talk about Ayn Rand. Years ago, there was some scare about some here today, gone tomorrow, scared today, gone tomorrow, rocker. The one, Marilyn Manson, who was a member of the Church of Satan. And so I did some research about the Church of Satan, which was founded by Anton LaVey. And it is supposedly atheist. Okay. But also Anton LaVey revealed that most of the philosophy of the Church of Satan was cribbed directly from Ayn Rand, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. Joe Biden says he will debate Trump in 10 days in Miami if scientists say it's safe. Perhaps he can speak from, inside a plastic enclosure. If the scientists say that it's safe, the distances are safe, then I think that's fine. I'll do whatever the experts say is appropriate to do. You see, he's leaving himself an out here for not debating Trump again, because as you will recall, Trump was mocked for beating up on an elderly man with Alzheimer's. Biden wouldn't comment on the president's health. I'm reluctant to comment on anything on the president's health, what he's doing and not doing. I'll leave that to the docs to talk about it, but I'm not going to comment on any of his conduct or his health. I don't know enough to know. Then, when asked if he'd prefer the next debate to be virtual or if plexiglass should be used to separate the candidates, Biden said the organizers should listen to the science. At one point, Biden's wife, Jill, tugged at him to back up and be more socially distant from the pool of reporters interviewing him. As I say, they're terrified that he's going to get COVID and he's going to die. And this terror is being communicated to the American people, and it seems weak. Example of weakness. Oh, Piers Morgan, or Piers Moron, as Private Eye dubbed him, shouts in the Daily Mail, COVID-infected Trump's outrageous joyride stunt proves he learned nothing about coronavirus and is shamefully prepared to risk Secret Service agents' lives to save his electoral skin by trying to look like a tough guy. Let's see. It was outrageously, inexcusably late for the president to be waking up and smelling the Corona coffee given that over 200,000 people in America have already died. And again, since every time you turn on a screen, there's a counter there giving the latest on deaths. Is there a single person in America that doesn't know that over 200,000 deaths have been attributed to COVID-19? But better late than never. And with the virus still raging furiously across the United States, Trump's conversion to COVID believer, he was never? When was he a COVID denier? Couldn't have come at a more crucial time, assuming he meant it. His "I get it" speech came after reports he feared he would die from COVID, like one of his closest New York real estate tycoon friends had done in April. Vanity Fair's Gabriel Sherman tweeted that before being taken to Walter Reed Hospital, Trump kept asking aides, "Am I going out like Stan Chera? Am I?" And again, I do not trust a single word about Donald Trump that does not come from Donald Trump, because the media has been lying about him repeatedly since 2015, ever since he came down that escalator. Alec Berenson has this comment, it's now his pinned tweet, maybe the smartest comment a real Donald Trump has ever made. For too long, we have let this virus and the media's hysteria around it dominate us. We need to take back our lives, our schools, and our whole world. Let's see. Jeff Jarvis had tweeted, "Repeat, media, do not say that Trump is discharged. That is a lie. He is transferred to his private ward. Do not play into his propaganda." And Alec Berenson comments, "Sweetie, it's over." Yes, it's over. And there's an awful lot of disappointed people out there. So many examples of how public health types were calm 7 months ago are now hysterical when the data say that they should have gone exactly the opposite way. Here's one more from Dr. Phillips, MD, last seen hyperventilating about Donald Trump. And there's a thread here. Dr. Phillips, what about masks? Wear them if you go out with even a mild cough, but in that case, staying home is smarter. But will masks protect me? Masks offer minimal protection to the individual. Surgical masks, the blue ones, are not designed to filter the air. Even the special N95 filter masks, designed to be true virus protection and now in short supply, are effective only if properly fitted and worn over clean-shaven faces. Okay, what about broad lockdowns? It is imperative that we fund research to determine how long the infected are contagious and when people can safely return to work so that we can keep our economy from suffering. One thing is certain, panic helps nobody. We have a controversy in Canada. Some years ago, Sikhs, who have 7 symbols, one of which is a beard, although there are many people who call themselves Sikhs and are accepted as Sikhs, who do not have a long beard, do not wear a turban, do not carry a kirpan or knife on their body. But so, what was it, back in the 80s, Sikhs were not allowed to join the Royal Canadian Mounted Police because of their turbans. They can't wear a hat over it. And they were not allowed to join the Royal Canadian Legion because the wearing of headgear is forbidden. So there was a lot of talk about racism, and so Sikhs were allowed in both the Legion and the RCMP. But now the Sikhs are angry because they have been relegated to desk work because, as mentioned previously, you are not supposed to wear a mask over a beard. So they are upset. There was a piece by Vaclav Smil in the IEEE Spectrum, which I highly recommend. It's called Pandemic Memories and Mortalities. Though many of us lived through the flu pandemics of 1957 and 1968, almost nobody can dredge up personal memories of those times, and that's interesting. When SARS-CoV-2, a new coronavirus, began to spread outside China in the early months of 2020, both the news media and scientific publications looked back to the most lethal pandemic in modern history. It was called the Spanish flu, though it had nothing whatever to do with Spain. That pandemic began early in 1918. Its third and final wave was spent only a year later, and we will never know the exact death toll. Published estimates range from about 17 million to 100 million, with 50 million being perhaps the most likely total. If we divide that number up by the 1.8 billion people that were alive in the world, we get a global mortality rate of about 2.8%. What I find strange is that the unfolding COVID-19 event has prompted relatively few references to the three latest pandemics for which we do have good numbers. The first event, caused by the H2N2 virus, began to spread from China in February 1957 and ended in April 1958. The second, also beginning in China, came in May 1968 when the H3N2 virus surfaced. The first wave peaked before the year's end, and in some countries the effects persisted until April 1970. Finally, there was the H1N1 virus originating in Mexico and declared to be a pandemic by the World Health Organization on 11 July 2009. It stopped spreading before the end of the year. The best reconstructions estimate that excess deaths, those presumably resulting from pandemics, ranged from 1.5 million to 4 million in the first of these three pandemics, from 1.1 million to 4 million in the second, and from 150,000 to 575 deaths in the third. The world's population grew throughout these years, and adjusting for that changing number yields excess death rates of about 52 per 100,000 from 1957 to 1958, 30 per 100,000 from 1968 to 1970, and 2.3 to 5.2 per 100,000 in 2009. In comparison, the worldwide death toll attributable to SARS-CoV-2 was about 865,000 by the end of August 2020. Given the global population of about 7.8 billion, this translates to an interim pandemic mortality of about 11 deaths per 100,000 people. Even if the total number of deaths were to triple, the mortality rate would be comparable to that of the 1968 pandemic and would be about 2/3 of the 1957 rate. Yet it is remarkable that these more virulent pandemics had such evanescent economic consequences. The United Nations World Economic and Social Surveys from the late 1950s contain no references to a pandemic or a virus, nor did the pandemics leave any deep traumatic traces in memories. Even if one very conservatively assumes that lasting memory started only 10 years of age, then 350 million of the people who are alive today ought to remember the previous pandemics, and 1 billion people ought to remember the last two. But I've yet to come across anybody who has vivid memories of the pandemics of 1957 or 1968. Countries did not resort to any mass-scale economic lockdowns, enforce any long-lasting school closures, ban sports events, or cut flight schedules deeply. Today's pandemic has led to a deep 50 to 90% reduction in flights, but during the earlier pandemics, aviation was marked by notable advances. On October 17, 1958, half a year after the end of the second pandemic wave in the West and about a year before the pandemic ended in Chile, the last holdout, Pan Am inaugurated its Boeing 707 jet service to Europe. And the Boeing 747, the first wide-body jetliner, entered scheduled service months before the last wave of the contemporary pandemic ended in 1970. I do remember the introduction of the Boeing 747, how exciting that was. But it is true that I have no memory of this pandemic. None. Why were things so different back then? Was it because we had no fear reinforcing 24/7 cable news, no Twitter, and no incessant and instant case and death tickers on all our electronic screens? Or is it we ourselves who have changed by valuing recurrent but infrequent risks differently? So look at the chat. Metal Mike says classic philosophy was useful to lay some early foundations. The modern era demands we pay attention to modern day philosophers like the late George Grant. Yes, I recall that British Columbia had after Glenn Clark, they had a Sikh premier. And I found out that this man was considered a Sikh, welcomed in Sikh temples. He's clean shaven, no turban. And I got the feeling that we had been cheated because we were told that Sikhism demanded the observance of these 7 signs. And it turns out that that is not, in effect, true. Donald Robertson says, I remember standing in a long line outdoors for a vaccine in 1968. I have a card somewhere that lists all of the vaccinations and top-ups I recurred at school. There seemed to be an awful lot of them. And of course, I have a vaccination scar on top of one of my arms. Metatron says peers blaming toxic masculinity. LOL. Yeah, that is pretty funny. It is pretty funny indeed. Dear KMG show host, can you say Vauxhall Labrador 3 times fast? Let's see. Vauxhall Labrador, Vauxhall Labrador, Vauxhall Labrador. Is that fast enough? Martha Hoople's version was much better than Bowie's, says Chogokin 666. Yeah, there was also a scandal about that because Ian Hunter, their singer, who was a very old man. We're used to old people in rock music now, but he hit his age because he was well into his 30s when he finally became a star, but he couldn't hit the high notes. And in fact, they had the roadie, the tour manager, who used to be the lead singer of the band. He hit the high notes, and I don't know, this was considered to be a big scandal. I mean, Ian Hunter, his voice was pretty, rudimentary. I mean, no one's exactly going to confuse him with, say, Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau. Okay. So, let's see what J5 Killer has to say. If Trump is supposed to be losing this race, this is Colin the Patriot. If Trump is supposed to be losing this race due to massive Democrat turnout and early mail-in voting, why are Republicans already leading in early mail numbers in blue states like Nevada and Michigan? And there's a picture of, Bronze Age Pervert has put a picture of Trump saluting with the caption, Invincible Hero. Ronald Brownstein had tweeted, the astonishingly tone-deaf, oh dear, there's that problematic phrase again, and obsequious response to a disease that's now killed 210K plus Americans is actually quite revealing, for it loudly says that Kelly Loeffler would continue as an apologist and sycophant for anything Trump does if she and he win in 2020. A very clear signal. J5 Killer responded, the perpetual nerd, perpetually looking to be shoved into the eternal locker. Jennifer Rubin, who is the token conservative at the Washington Post, they also have George Will as well. She seemed to be unhinged about Trump getting COVID. Absolutely unhinged. It's just, I don't know. These people take it all so personally, and I'm just wondering what exactly Trump did to her directly. This is what she tweeted on October the 4th. I would hope that if any harm comes to those agents, the Attorney General of Maryland will indict Trump for reckless endangerment, assault, yes, the virus he gives off count, etc. Yep, they all want Trump arrested. It's not sufficient to beat him. Nope. He must be arrested. The hanging Chad, said Jennifer Rubin, makes it easy to imagine what Bolsheviks were like before they started their revolution and executed Tsar Nicholas and his family. Yes, Tsar Nicholas was in the news recently, and I'll have more to say that in a minute, about that in a minute. Frank Burton tweeted, spitting in the face of black pillars and crybabies is unironically one of my top reasons for voting for Trump. J5 Killer says, how many times must I tell people no blackpilling? Blackpilling is for losers, especially at this stage of the game. Literally every indicator, fundamental or trend, except the big media polls, shows Trump winning re-election. Blackpilling plays into the hands of our enemies. They want us to despair. The spontaneous outpouring of love for Dr. President Trump at Bethesda made them hysterical. They were melting down yesterday big time, all because they can't blackpill the Trumpians. The left is in full disarray. They're as fragile as Joe Biden. Any good news sends them into screeching hysterics. If you really think about it, the polls aren't for us MAGA-ians. They're designed to keep the Dems from committing mass suicide. Let me tell you, even if Trump loses, he won't. I'm not going to act as if it's not a big deal. I'm going to smile, a little rueful smile, dust myself off, and get back in the game. I refuse to give my enemies the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I refuse to publicly blackpill, but that's not happening. Trump is a winner. He has the uncanny ability to will himself victorious. Every time these shitheels thought they had him in the box, he's busted out and made them dance to his tune. And if you don't think that's happening again, GTFO, you are wrong. Yes, J5 Killer is well known for his phrase, always trust Trump. And again, Vanity Fair can write what they like. I don't believe it. Well, I've been burned. We've all been burned so many times. Oh, yes, the Steele dossier. Ooh, that looks really, really, really bad. It was all made up, wasn't it? Representative Devin Nunes declared Sunday the U.S. intelligence agency should be forced to release so-called smoking gun documents that are said to contain details of Russian intelligence, referring to an authorization given by Hillary Clinton to link President Trump to efforts by the Kremlin to interfere in the 2016 election. In a Fox News interview, Nunes, the top Republican on the House Intelligence Committee, said every Republican senator and member of Congress should be saying, we want every damn bit of evidence that every intelligence agency has, or it's maybe time to shut those agencies down. A memo released last week via the Senate Judiciary Committee, penned by Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe, claims that U.S. intelligence made an investigative referral to the FBI regarding the information in September 2016. In the memo, Ratcliffe notes that the referral mentioned approval of a plan concerning U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump and Russian hackers hampering U.S. elections as a means of distracting the public from Hillary's use of a private mail server. There's plenty of circumstantial evidence to know this, Maria. I guess he's talking to the Fox News host, Maria, what's her name, Bartiromo, that the Clinton campaign had created all of this because they knew that 33,000 emails were out there somewhere. So what did they do? They created a sick fantasy. That was the Clinton campaign. The Clinton campaign created this sick fantasy. Then they went out and hired avatars to do it, Nunes added, referring to the effort to delegitimize Trump's campaign. So they hired a former British spy named Christopher Steele, who did the Steele dossier. Then they hired the suspected Russian spy so they could give it a veneer of being a Russian. So imagine that. Because the information has remained classified, those who have seen it cannot discuss it. Nunes urged that what he has seen are definitely smoking guns, and the information definitely needs to be made available to the American public. An article in Stat News. Brainiacs, not bird brains. Crows possess higher intelligence, long thought a primarily human attribute. I never paid much attention to crows until a few years ago. I was attacked by a swarm of them. I was walking in Victoria, and I got some bread from the Salvation Army, and I had a few days' supply of bread. So I thought I would be kind to the birds, and pulled off little pieces of bread and dropped it on the sidewalk. And the birds ate it all up. And then I decided that these crows had had enough bread from me, and I wasn't going to give them any more. And the crows decided they weren't having that. And they boxed me in. There would be the crows harrying me from behind, and there would be crows would fly to the next hydro pole or whatever, and they'd wait for me there. And it was at the time that one of the crow's talons scraped across my skull that I panicked and ran into a nearby McDonald's until the birds dispersed. I did some research into crows, and actually I watched this documentary on the BC government TV, and it was supposed to make people feel better about crows. And one of the things I learned is that crows can remember human faces for up to 2 years. And I thought, nah, this isn't working. Also, they discussed the roost, where all the crows go at twilight. And again, this made me worry more about crows. I've also learned that when crows are nesting, you do not want to go near their nests. Even if they're 20 feet up high in a tree, if you pass by this tree, the crows will come after you. According to this article, whether crows, ravens, and other corvids are making multi-part tools like hooked sticks to reach grubs, solving geometry puzzles made famous by Aesop, or nudging a clueless hedgehog across a highway before it becomes roadkill, they have long impressed scientists with their intelligence and creativity. Now the birds can add one more feather to their brainiac claims. Research unveiled on Thursday in Science finds that crows know what they know and can ponder the content of their own minds, a manifestation of higher intelligence and analytical thought, long believed to be the sole province of humans and a few other higher mammals. A second study, also in Science, looked in unprecedented detail at the neuroanatomy of pigeons and barn owls, finding hints to the basis of their intelligence that likely applies to corvids too. Together, the two papers show that intelligence, consciousness are grounded in connectivity and activity patterns of neurons in the most neuron-dense part of the bird brain called the pallium. Brains can appear diverse and at the same time share profound similarities. The extent to which similar properties present themselves might be simply a matter of scale, how many neurons are available to work. It's been a good week for bird brains, said crow expert John Marsloff of the University of Washington, who is not involved in the new studies. In particular, the discovery that crows know what they know will not surprise avian scientists who have increasingly demonstrated the cognitive abilities of birds, but they will be relieved. This research is groundbreaking. Apparently, crows' brains have 1.5 billion neurons, as many as some monkey species. So we heard last week that one tech company is not going to go woke. And Jack Dorsey of Twitter was very upset that Coinbase has decided it's not going to get involved in politics, because apparently crypto is all about politics. And if you collect crypto, you must be left-wing or some such nonsense. There's an article in Revolver. Did Coinbase CEO just launch the anti-woke counter-revolution? Woke capital is the dominant ideology of America's corporate and media elites. Seemingly every major corporation in America has either actively embraced or paid obedient lip service to the left's rhetoric supporting Black Lives Matter and Antifa, including false narratives such as systemic racism. Neutrality is simply not an option, as evidenced by the mob's favorite slogan, "Silence is violence." That is why woke capital is furious about and terrified of Coinbase, a cryptocurrency tech startup whose CEO Brian Armstrong openly defied the woke totalitarianism corporate America shoved down the throats of its employees and customers alike. Last week, Coinbase became the biggest news in tech when Armstrong publicly announced that his company will stay out of politics, both in public and in the workplace. Everyone is asking the question about how companies should engage in broader societal issues during these difficult times, while keeping their teams united and focused on the mission. Coinbase has had its own challenges here, including employee walkouts. I decided to share publicly how I'm addressing this in case it helps others navigate a path through these challenging times. In short, I want Coinbase to be laser focused on achieving its mission, because I believe that this is the way we can have the biggest impact in the world. We won't debate causes or political candidates internally that are unrelated to work. We won't expect the company to represent our personal beliefs externally. We won't assume negative intent or not have each other's back, and we won't take on activism outside of our core mission at work. For his defiance to the mob, Armstrong faces a barrage of hostile press coverage attempting to force him to take a knee just like everyone else. Michael Bloomberg's personal news division produced a ridiculous article on Coinbase's rattled employees who fear being muzzled. Vice claimed that Coinbase is showing workers with a conscience the door. It then unintentionally honored Armstrong by comparing his stand to one of Trump's best policy initiatives. Armstrong describes worker actions against racial injustice as sowing division, and it's hard not to see how this stance is in line with the Trump administration's recent actions. For example, Trump's executive order banning federal contractors from carrying out racial sensitivity training, and attacks against historians like Howard Zinn and projects like the New York Times 1619 Project. Trump, too, described attention being paid to racial injustice as being divisive. Former Twitter CEO Dick Costolo gave the most blunt response of all. He initially tweeted that Coinbase's policy was an abdication of leadership, but 2 days later, he was more explicit. If Armstrong doesn't change course, Costello tweeted, he deserves to be executed. And this is what Costello tweeted on October 1st. Me first capitalists who think you can separate society from business are going to be the first people lined up against the wall and shot in the revolution. I'll happily provide video commentary. So far, Armstrong has remained strong, and like Red Bull's CEO, who months ago bravely took a stand against corporate subservience to the woke terrorists, has refused to cave to the mob's totalitarian demands. It's obvious what is motivating Armstrong. For years, activists concentrated in deadweight departments like HR and advertising have assimilated functional, profitable companies into the left's totalitarian Borg. They demand racial hiring quotas, corporate censorship, and the propagation of sickening transgender propaganda. Armstrong saw that a revolution like this was coming to his own company. According to CoinDesk, Armstrong began to plan for the company's new position after several Coinbase engineers closed their laptops one day over the summer after Armstrong wouldn't say Black Lives Matter externally amid social unrest over police killings of unarmed Black men and women. Armstrong decided he wouldn't be threatened. He's heard the maxim, get woke, go broke, and bravely decided to quash the revolution before it happened. He didn't pledge support for Donald Trump. He didn't rename his company Coinbase. He merely said that his company would abstain from politics both publicly and in the workplace. But in 2020, even this is a revolutionary act, and Armstrong knows it. On Wednesday, he sent a follow-up letter to employees announcing that if any weren't up for keeping politics and separate, he'd pay them to go away. 6 months of severance pay, it turns out, is a small price to purge far-left extremists from one's company. It's no wonder, then, that Armstrong's defiant stand has the press and woke capital in a panic. It's obvious that the vast majority of people, and in particular the vast majority of productive workers, prefer Armstrong's corporate vision. They want to work at a business, not a gulag. If Armstrong can thrive while vocally rejecting the left's political demands, then other corporate leaders will be emboldened to do the same. And I think that that is quite true. Armstrong's actions and the support he's received show that there are scores of very wealthy tech entrepreneurs who are just as fed up with BLM riots and the left's woke nonsense as the rest of us. And this, of course, is what makes Armstrong's act of defiance so dangerous to so many of our corrupt ruling class. What they fear more than anything is the emergence of a true elite of young, hungry, talented patriots who are fed up with their nonsense. All you need is a few brave, talented men like Armstrong to form a critical mass capable of forming durable parallel institutions to supplant those that have been corroded and poisoned by our nation's old, mediocre, fragile ruling class. Vox Populi, Vox Day, brought this to my attention at his website. He writes, in light of this statement, it wouldn't surprise me in the least if Dick Costello was the inspiration behind Patreon's remarkably self-destructive decision to breach the very contract it unilaterally imposed on its users by suing them in a group action. And more about the NBA. The second game of the final was watched by is down by 70%. 70%, which is, I don't know, maybe people just don't like basketball very much anymore. I suppose it could be a reaction to Black Lives Matter, because NBA, more than any other sport, has decided that they are going to lecture Americans on their wickedness, on the pervasiveness of white supremacism, which apparently you're stuck with it. There's no cure for it. No cure, and there's no vaccine either. So, I never heard of this fellow called George M. Johnson before, but he is an American black man and a writer. He describes himself as a award-winning writer, author of best-selling All Boys Aren't Blue. Yeah. And I looked at the illustration for this, and it sort of gave me an idea about George M. Johnson. Yeah, and I looked it up, and it's true. It's an exuberant, unapologetic memoir infused with a deep but clear-eyed love for its subjects. Johnson lays bare the darkest moments in his life with wit and unflinching vulnerability. Oh, it's a memoir manifesto. and he's made up to look like Carmen Miranda on the cover. But he had something strange on his mind on October 2nd. He wrote, "Imagine the slaves praying for master. The notion of morality is a white supremacist ideal." The notion of morality is a white supremacist ideal. So, in the absence of morality, what kind of world would we have? Would everyone be bashing each other over the head? Would everyone be breaking into everyone's houses and stealing their stuff? And when challenged, respond with deadly violence? I guess, in a way, one could be grateful for the outbreak of Black Lives Matter in 2020, because it revealed how many people who are in the elite, how many of them are batshit crazy. There's no other way to describe it. No other way to describe it. He says, imagine the slaves praying for master. Now, this could be seen as, incitement. Because I'm sure that George M. Johnson believes that Black people in the United States are held down by systemic racism and white supremacism. So what should they do? And I'm getting very bad feeling from reading this tweet. A very, very bad feeling indeed. Let's have a look at the chat. Okay, let's talk about philosophy here. Donald Robertson, obvious thing to do would be to toss MSN in lockup. Yeah, memoir manifestos makes me nervous, makes me think of the Unabomber, says Lola J. Life would be, yes, nasty, brutish, and short, eh, Mr. Hobbs? I guess it would be. I guess it would be. I mean, it's clear that there's an awful lot of disappointment with Black Lives Matter because, oh, yes, we must end white supremacy now. Oh, and we must change all of the institutions must be revolutionized. Well, even if there was a will to do that, it's not going to happen all at once. It's not going to happen all in 1 year. And I suppose a lot of these BLM supporters have gotten very unhappy because, they wake up and they realize that the world is, substantially the same as it was, say, the day before, or a month before, or 6 months before. Debrea says, we still have Cardi B. Yes. Contracu says, the people who think that they will be left alone to provide video commentary during the burgeoning neo-Bolshevik uprising are in for a very rude awakening, particularly a man like Dick Costello, who has a fortune of $300 million. Brandon Smith says, will Joe have caught the vapors by the election? Seems pretty likely. Yes, the Yacht Club revolution, says De Boreas. Take these broken wings and learn to loot, says Glib Medley. Yeah. So what? Morality is white supremacy. Math is white supremacy. Physics is white supremacy. Aren't these people afraid that they're giving white supremacy a rather good reputation? I wonder if that has occurred. I wonder if that has occurred to them. Speaking of narcissism, Meghan Markle is just constantly in the news, or Meghan Mertz, as I like to call her, and Maureen Callahan in the New York Post. Hypocrites, Meghan and Harry beg for privacy, but are hungry for attention. It's only been 10 months since Prince Harry and Meghan Mertz announced they were leaving the British royal family in search of privacy, yet they have never been so much in our faces, sanctimoniously and hypocritically telling us how to live and who to vote for, all while signing a reported $100 million deal with Netflix. Also, Markle is reportedly eyeing a run for president of the United States in 2024. Yet this formerly unknown C-list actress who couldn't hack the cosseted existence of a senior royal whose entire adult life has been spent in search of a spotlight she now claims to disdain, thinks she has the grit, intellect, and real-world experience necessary for the top job. She would seriously consider running for president, a close friend of Markle's told Vanity Fair last month. The short-term goal was, the source said, one of the reasons she was so keen not to give up her American citizenship upon marrying into the royal family 2 years ago. Does anyone remotely think Harry is running this show? Not even our current president buys that. Not a fan, Trump said of Mertz at a recent White House press conference. I wish a lot of luck to Harry because he's going to need it. This is, I think, one thing we can all agree upon with Trump. To look at Harry's posture and facial expressions in any of the numerous videos he and Meghan keep foisting on the nation in lockdown, truly, what have we done to deserve this, is to see a hostage situation. Take a recent video from September 23rd, produced in conjunction with Time magazine. Harry and Meghan in their vast backyard, a sleek black dog gamboling through lush background greenery. Harry twitching as Meghan explains to us in gobbledygook Oprah speak why this presidential election is more important than any other. Not so subtle subtext: don't vote for Donald Trump. Also, how voting can raise our self-esteem. When we vote, our values are put into action and our voices are heard, says Meghan. Your voice is a reminder that you matter, because you do, and you deserve to be heard. Thanks for that. An uncomfortable-looking Harry follows up by telling us he's not going to be able to vote here in the U.S. You don't say. This Get Out the Vote video is just one example of how exhausting these two have quickly become. Their hypocrisy, like their lack of self-awareness, is limitless. Hey, who would you most like to hear speak about Black Lives Matter? It's got to be Harry and Megs, sitting in front of three well-placed bird's nest prints, $360 per, in their $14 million mansion in Montecito. Yes, and it was pointed out to me over the weekend that Montecito is very, very white. It is, they call it white-topia. And there were hardly any black people there at all. I mean, Oprah lives there. Yes, it was Ray Sawhill. They live in Montecito, California, which is 0.6% African American. And of course, I mean, one doesn't need to wit to point out that someone who is called a duchess is giving people lectures on privilege. There's something like all of, I believe, 26, I think, dukedoms in the United Kingdom. Pretty expensive, exclusive club there. This story from the Mail. Meghan Markle's eye blocks and throat tightening are signs her ego was left raging when she was told she's not the only powerful woman during Fortune's virtual summit, body expert claims. The Duchess of Sussex showed signs that she doesn't like being told she's not the only powerful woman. How is she powerful? What is the nature of her power exactly? She's not even the emperor of ice cream. Megan Mertz, 39, who spoke from the $14 million Santa Barbara home she shares with her husband, Prince Harry, and their one-year-old son, Archie, last Tuesday, claimed she pays no mind to public flattery or criticism, while also hitting out at the media for misinterpreting remarks she has made in order to make them sound more controversial or inflammatory. However, speaking to the Mirror, body language expert Bruce Durham believes that not all aspects of the royals' interview were authentic. He pinpoints the exact moment he feels the Duchess shows signs of being uncomfortable and puts it down to the moment Fortune senior editor Ellen McGirt tells her she's not the only powerful woman involved in this equation. And she doesn't receive it like that. She receives it as a threat, he explained. Up until then, the interviewer is still heaping praise on Meghan. He went on to say that she gives away several key signs to suggest that her ego is raging, including brushing her hair in a bid to reframe herself to look like a powerful woman. He added lots of eye blocks. She wants to be the person in the room. Watch her throat, tightening of the throat. It's an animalistic reaction. She does not like hearing she's not the only powerful equation. Bruce claims another sign that Meghan is trying to highlight her authenticity is by repeating the word authentic on a number of occasions. During the interview, Meghan also insisted she does not actually focus on anything written about her, be it negative or positive, turning to a quote from artist Georgia O'Keeffe. Yeah, I wonder where she found that. to express her views about flattery and criticism. And the moment you are able to be liberated from all these other opinions of what you know to be true, then I think it's just very easy to just live with peace and live with authenticity. And this is how I choose to move through the world. So she doesn't care what other people think about her. How many news organizations is she currently suing right now, including one of them for showing a picture of her holding her baby, which was on public property? A body language expert claims the Duchess of Sussex shows negativity by offering a shrug of her lips and constantly looking down. The comments come after another body language expert. How many are there? Judy James spoke to the Express and claimed that Prince Harry employed guru-style body language and waggled his hands when he met LA runners on Saturday. Ahead of the race, the Duke of Sussex wished runners competing across the globe good luck and praised participants for providing a lifeline for vulnerable people amid the pandemic by raising money for various charities. The father of one, who was also patron of the London Marathon Charitable Trust, posed with runners who were starting off in a much sunnier Los Angeles park. However, Judy commented that while it was for a great cause, the arrangement of Prince Harry's floor seating instead gives the impression of a guru-style teaching session. So it's all going to end in tears. Oh, you know who's also underpaid and underrated? Yeah, Serena Williams. Yeah, kind of shocking, don't you think? For some reason, she is on the cover of Vogue magazine. She is not a model, and she is not a particularly good-looking woman. But it's 2020. Serena Williams has told how she loves representing beautiful dark women as she discussed her thoughts on body confidence and the Black Lives Matter movement. Yes, it's all about you, isn't it? The tennis champion, 39, appears on the front cover of British Vogue's November issue and told the publication how she feels she has been underpaid and undervalued in the past in comparison to her male and white female counterparts. Well, she's complained for years that female tennis players don't earn as much as male tennis players. Yeah, they play best of five. They play best of five, whereas the women only play best of three. That would be one reason. She said, I've never been a person that has been like, I want to be a different color. I want my skin tone to be lighter. I like who I am. I like how I look, and I love representing the beautiful dark women out there. For me, it's perfect. I wouldn't want it any other way. Serena also discussed her feelings on body image, saying how she felt like her sister Venus had a body deemed more acceptable by society when they were growing up, as she was more slender than her younger sibling. She's talking about comparing her body with her sister's body, and poor Serena Williams doesn't have the societally demanded type of body. Serena said, when I was growing up, what was celebrated was different. Venus looked more like what is really acceptable. She has incredibly long legs. She's really, really thin. I didn't see people on TV who looked like me, who were thick. There wasn't positive body image. It was a different age. Serena, who was mother to daughter Olympia too, who she shares with her husband Alexis Ohanian, explained she is thankful for the body she has. Let's talk more about your body, Serena. How amazing that my body has been able to give me the career that I've had, and I'm really thankful for it. I only wish I had been thankful sooner. It just all comes full circle when I look at my daughter. The sports star discussed the Black Lives Matter movement and the global protests that were sparked by the death of George Floyd in May. Serena told how she feels Black people have been given a new voice thanks to technology, because we see things that have been hidden for years. Did you ever hear of Rodney King? You ever hear of that incident? That was kind of a big deal. We see things that have been hidden for years, the things that we as people have to go through. This has been happening for years. People just couldn't pull out their phones and video it before. All right. Okay. She is one thirsty woman. Serena is. Now, okay, Jacobin magazine. I don't know that I've ever read it until today. I gather it's some leading leftist publication. Here is the editor and publisher at Jacobin Magazine. His name is Bhaskar Sunkara, and he has a tick next to his name. The question isn't what we think justice demands. I think killing little Romanov children was justified, but it's not surprising why these views are controversial given most people's ethical and moral frameworks. And I wonder if you would agree with George M. Johnson that morality is a white supremacist ideal, because, to this day, killing of children, that it's still controversial. Yeah. But I suppose that according to Bhaskar Sunkara, this is due to people's ethical and moral frameworks that still a little sheepish about killing children. So I found an article in Jacobin. It's called The Myth of Progressive Canada by Radhika Desai. And I pretty much stopped right there. I had to force myself to read this. Radhika Desai is a professor in the Department of Political Studies at the University of Manitoba, the director of the Geopolitical Economy Research Group, and the president of the Society for Socialist Studies. And I am sick and tired of being lectured by Bindies, frankly. If Canada is such a horrible place, and apparently it's been a horrible place since even before it became a country, then why is she here? Why are immigrants so desperate to come to Canada, and then so they can lecture us after being here a week? But what a terrible place it is. Her piece, The Myth of Progressive Canada. Canada's growing economic and military might abroad. What on earth is she talking about? Military might abroad? Canada's military is a joke and has been for years. My joke earlier this year was that 200 men with 22s could probably take Ottawa. It's a bit of an exaggeration, but not far from the truth. Military weaponry is very expensive, and for decades, prime ministers, both liberal and conservative, have talked up refurbishing our military weapon systems, and they never fall through. They never follow through, with the result that our military has precious little. The idea that Canada's military might abroad is exploding, really, or expanding, it's nuts. The myths about Canada's supposedly progressive role in global affairs are so durable that even former Prime Minister Stephen Harper couldn't sully them. The right-wing Harper decade never stopped Canadians from patting themselves on the back, nor has liberal continuity with the essentials of foreign policy since. The image of Canada's pivotal role in peacekeeping, humanitarian assistance, and the safeguarding of democracy and human rights around the world remains cherished. It remains cherished by some Canadians, but if you hear people carrying on about peacekeeping, you know exactly who you're dealing with. Now, I suppose if you ask these people, what on earth are Canadian peacekeepers doing in Mali, in Africa? What are they doing there? I don't think they would have an answer for you. One reason, no doubt, is that the dominant tradition of left scholarship in Canada since the 1970s has taken the form of a kind of left nationalism, taking its cue from the contemporaneous emergence of world systems analysis. What? Left scholarship since that time is centered around Canada's dependent status, its domination by the United States, its reliance on primary commodities like crude oil, natural gas, and uranium, and corresponding weakness in manufacturing. But this analysis, which depicts Canada as an ineffectual, if not benign player on the world stage, leaves little room for any investigation of the country's imperial role, past and present. It directs our attention away from the comfortable niche Canada occupied in the structures of capitalist imperialism, first under British and then US leadership, as well as from its disgraceful treatment of Indigenous people. Well, there's something like 140 million people in India who are Dalits. They're literally untouchable, and we're being lectured by someone from there. Canada's international personality is marked precisely by these two traits: an economy of regionalized resource extraction on one hand, yes, and the Toronto Stock Exchange with its 3.25 trillion market capitalization on the other. Okay, where are you going with this? Canadian direct investment abroad, chiefly in mining and finance, has also increased massively since the early 1990s, with holdings in over 150 countries, giving Canada the fourth highest ratio of outbound foreign direct investment to gross domestic product. Canadian financial investment is concentrated in the Caribbean and Latin America, as is mining and energy investment, though the latter is also spreading out to countries in Africa and Central Asia as well. So the argument here is that investment in other countries is imperialism. Okay. The full panoply of Canada's international activity should be seen in light of these massive investments abroad. The Canadian economic policy advocacy and aid regime, whether in multilateral forums such as the Bretton Woods institutions or bi and multilateral trade and investment deals, promote neoliberal good governance, even in apparently high-minded and altruistic endeavors such as the heavily indebted poor countries initiative. The good governance advocated by these organizations is alleged to be the kind of prosperity when, in fact, the programs they promote amount to kicking away the ladder of exactly the state interventionist policies that made rich countries rich in the first place. Really? Is that how Canada became rich? Because state interventionist policies? Canada didn't have much of a welfare state at all until the 1960s. The United States was well ahead of Canada in that regard. Worse, the programs are designed to privilege Canada's own domestic corporations. That's a bad thing. Why? Over private and public economic actors in the developing world. Canadian foreign policy institutions like CETA, the Canadian International Development Agency, even go so far as to work with developing world governments to make their state legislation more foreign investor friendly. The end result is that Canada's paltry aid budget, oh, so sad, dwarfed by profits from developing world investment, largely ends up in Canadian pockets. But this isn't the frictionless process many neoliberals would want it to be. People can and do fight back. Canadian mining and energy investments abroad are facing increasing opposition, just as they are at home, particularly from Indigenous peoples. As Deneau and Sacher argue, it is precisely the legal infrastructure of Canada's mining sector designed for a settler state bent on dispossessing local populations that has ensured that the TXS is home to 3/4 of the world's mining companies. Okay, so Canada is a settler state bent on dispossessing local populations. I guess we should just cut off immigration entirely. Because we don't want any more settlers dispossessing local populations. Perhaps we should suggest that the people who came to Canada from, say, roughly 1970 on, that they redirect their talents towards their own third world countries, which are, desperately in need of their talents. I'm sure India could use a lot more socialist analysis. I'm sure they could. And it's a shame this woman is not providing it. Yes, the benefits of diversity. And I suppose Canadians have become rather inured to this sort of thing. The story from Global News: did Canadian politicians know the victims of a targeted shooting at a trendy Richmond restaurant? It was shortly after 7 p.m. on a Friday night when shots rang through a trendy restaurant in Richmond, BC. Richmond is just across the Fraser River from Vancouver. It's where the airport is located, and it is now very heavily Chinese to the part. Well, for decades there have been shopping districts where there are no signs in English, simply in Chinese. There was a case of a condo board in Richmond which announced that in the future, all of its meetings, the only language spoken accepted would be Mandarin Chinese. Sources with knowledge of the crime scene say bullets came from outside the building, blasting shards of glass into a private party of 12 diners and leaving one man dead from a bullet wound and another with relatively minor face wounds. There were also families with children dining in other sections of the restaurant. Investigators have officially described the September 18th shooting as a targeted attack. It's amazing not more people got hit. It was also the latest in a series of shootings in a region that is home to 10 of 14 organized crime groups listed by RCMP intelligence as high-level national threats. The two victims are allegedly elite suspects in an international gang involved in money laundering at BC casinos. The attack was also on the eve of upcoming hearings slated to run from October 2020 to April 2021 as part of the Cullen Commission, a provincial inquiry into money laundering. A fun fact, the BC real estate market, which accounts for about somewhere between 30 to 40% of the wealth of my province, is based on money laundering by triad gangsters. While it's not clear where that inquiry will lead, criminal intelligence sources say that the nature of the shooting should serve as a warning about threats to national security and risks for Canadian politicians who have been observed meeting with dangerous people. Intelligence sources say one of the victims, Paul King Jin, attended meetings organized in Canada by the Chinese Communist Party to allegedly interfere in Canadian politics and disrupt the country's institutions. According to sources, Jin survived the attack while Jan Junzhu was killed. Zhu was the corporate director of Silver International, a Richmond money services business. Canadian International Financial Intelligence records allege this firm has been laundering at least $1 billion annually for drug gangs based in China, the Middle East, and Latin America. The RCMP executed search warrants on the company in October 2015 as part of a major money laundering investigation into Silver International and a network of high-stakes gamblers in BC casinos. The gamblers were known to individually bet as much as $1 million per night in BC casinos using bags of cash supplied by Jin and Silver International. Jin and Zhu were both charged, but those charges were stayed, and Jin has denied allegations of wrongdoing. A number of Canadian politicians, including a BC NDP minister, a city councillor in the Vancouver region, a former Richmond MP, and a former Richmond federal minister known to be a key player in Liberal Party of Canada fundraising, have all attended events and appeared in private and published photos with Jin. These events took place after the first media reports about the police investigation against Silver International in September 2017. Police confirmed the charges against Jin and Zhu a month after those media reports. There is no evidence of wrongdoing on the part of the elected Canadian politicians who have attended meetings where Jin and others identified as suspects in RCMP documents are present, and it isn't clear whether they were aware of the risks. The politicians say part of their job requires them to meet with constituents. Yeah. As mentioned previously, I would reckon that Canada has been subverted as much as Australia has been, actually, and it's rather brave of Global News to run this story because people who write about Chinese gangsters, they often end up shot as a result. That for years now, there should be a major scandal, but for years now, parties, including the Conservative Party, have been running separate campaigns in different languages. That, for instance, they will print up material that is in Mandarin or Cantonese, and it is devoted exclusively to the wishes of Chinese in Canada. And often the left hand does not know what the right hand is doing. That officially the campaign will say one thing about, say, Asian immigration, Asian investors, but speaking to their own people, they say something completely different. And of course, Vancouver is now a city which is divided, on racial basis, that the Sikhs have their part of the city and the Chinese have, well, pretty much the rest of it, I guess. But let's take a final look at the chat here. Well, we're quoting Beatles lyrics now. Okay. Come on, let's see the rest of it. Hey, what's the color of crime? Book, movie, sounds interesting. Brandon Smith says China as a nation is gambling with its own future right now. Oh, Chinese gambling. Jared Taylor talks about this in The Color of Crime. Yes, it's pretty... the historical stories about this, a man running out of money and betting his own hand and losing it and sitting calmly at a table as his hand is chopped off. Crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. In prep school, we referred to those as fat camps. Someone would come back in the fall and be 50 pounds lighter. Yes, I used to hear the expression fat farms as well. People, what they made them wear, like rubber costumes and sweat, that sort of thing. Okay, so that's the show for today. I will be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern. And what's coming up? Theater Thursday, I'm going to be talking about a movie that came out this year called Bill and Ted Face the Music, which is the third Bill and Ted movie. It was talked about being, and Bill and Ted movie was talked about for a long time, and it's not till this year it was released, and it was clear that it was done hastily, very hastily. And in the book club, I am going to be discussing, where did it go? Where did it go? It should be here somewhere. Normally it's my pinned tweet. Oh, there we go. Okay, nope. Don't know what happened to it. But I'll get back to that. I'll let you all know tomorrow. I'm sure it's something good. If you would like to show any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you'd click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. If you would like to support this live stream with a donation, my PayPal address is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Once again, kevin_grace@hotmail.com. And if you're Canadian, you can send me money via Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. So I will leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear listeners and viewers, manage to form some kind of genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.